I am 38 years old. It's taken most of my 30s to be able to say those words. American women are taught you don't say your age. It's either something to be ashamed of or worried about. I don't really know. And I've fallen into that trap for a long time. But I freely admit to you my age today because I'm finally in a spot in my life where I'm okay with that. I'm 38. I've got a good life. I've got a job that I love. Great family. I'm finally in a position in my life where I feel mature. Don't get what I'm talking about? You finally feel like, okay, yeah, I'm there. I'm getting there. I'm 38. Today I'm going to talk to you about some people that are much closer to your age than mine. 3 very important men who acted in amazing ways. They became history makers. And they were 24, 23, and 26. You guys can relate to that. The first I've got to mention, of course, is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His ascent to his amazing work that he did began at the age of 26. I love this picture of him. This is him and his wife and Yolanda, his youngest child. They're young, they're happy, they're family. At 26, he was in Montgomery, Alabama. He had moved from Boston. His poor wife, she thought they might go somewhere a little bit more metropolitan, somewhere cooler than good old Montgomery. I can say that because I'm from Montgomery. They made that move. He was going to become a minister. This is what he worked for. He was happy to do it. He was excited that he was going to become a minister. Okay? When he got down there, he was liked. People knew who he was pretty quick. And you guys have heard his speeches before. You know, he's got a cadence about him. I wish I could replicate it. The way he speaks, it was just amazing. Within that year of him being there, Rosa Parks was arrested December 1st, 1955, for refusing to give up her seat on the bus. He got a call, Dr. King did, telling him, we need you. We need your leadership. And he did exactly what I know I would have done. Who, me? What? No. You must be somebody else. No way. Nixon called him, not President Nixon. And then Ralph Abernathy. Abernathy called him and kind of chided him. No, you are the guy. You see, these other 2 guys had been in Montgomery a longer time. They were known. The king, he was new, he was young, he was fresh. And they knew that the Montgomery black community would rally around him. He reluctantly agreed. And the night after Rosa Parks was arrested is when he came up on that stage. He came into the pulpit and he began his speech. He began telling the Montgomery black community what the next step was. They'd already started kind of the idea of the bus boycott. They'd gone to several areas where blacks were known to frequent, told them about, we're gonna stop riding the buses. And so when they met together like this, history gives us a number, but those that were there tell us it's like 3 or 4 times the number that history records, because they are standing on the streets just trying to be close. This is his speech where he begins talking about how important their cause is and what they're supposed to do. Excuse me. This is where he says, if we are wrong, then the Supreme Court is wrong. If we are wrong, then God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, Jesus of Nazareth was but a mere utopian dreamer who did not return to earth. These are pretty strong words, but he had the crowd going. He bought in. They were all in. They were ready to go. We know him for these great speeches, these amazing things that he did, how he rallied together the community and got them excited, got them willing to nearly for a year walk rather than ride a bus. But what about him? What about Dr. King himself? What kind of cost was this to him? He's 26 years old. And he is the face, he is the voice of the civil rights movement. This young minister, that's not really what he had in mind. And yet he did. He went through some pretty awful things. He was attacked physically. He was attacked emotionally. The people that followed him, believed in him, were attacked. And these were all things that really weighed on him. In the late 50s, he's traveling more than 780,000 miles a year. 780,000 miles a year. That's creeping up on 1 million miles a year. That's a lot. And he's got this at home. He's attacked by a black woman in Harlem with a knife. He's nearly killed in 1958. By 1960, he'd been arrested 4 times, one of which was on purpose, the rest not so much. By 61, he had seen the Freedom Riders in Anniston, and within minutes in Birmingham and Anniston, there was the firebombing of the bus, and then in Birmingham was the beat down by the Klan. These are things that he internalized. He was upset. He was fearful for them. He's obviously fearful himself. He's fearful for his family. In 1962, he's attacked on stage by American Nazis. They nearly beat him senseless, all the while he's yelling at the people that are watching. So kind of picture yourselves, and I'm getting beaten, and he's yelling, "Don't come up here. Pray for him." I don't begin to understand how that would happen. Trust me, folks, if somebody comes and attacks me, I want you to all come quick. I don't want to do that. Moneymaker, that's what my daughter calls it. Don't touch the face. Oh, that's my husband's fault, by the way. This is a man that's bruised and battered for a cause that he wasn't even sure would work. We're told that 1956, he receives a phone call. He'd just come home from a meeting. Coretta and Yolanda are already asleep for the night, and he gets this phone call, and he answers the phone. He's in his kitchen. And the caller begins with racial slurs. It tells him you have 3 days to get out of Montgomery. If you don't, we will blow your head off and blow your home up. He hangs up the phone in a fog. How do you respond to that? Number one, you didn't even believe that this was supposed to be what you're supposed to do. And you're the one getting this kind of call. You're fearful for your life, but this? Come on, they have nothing to do with this. He hangs up the phone and begins to pray. Drops his head into his hands. He didn't realize it till a little later on that he's praying out loud. You ever been in that spot? You're so desperate that you just begin to pray. He prays really a beautiful prayer, one I really can relate to. Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right. But Lord, I'm faltering. I'm losing my courage. And I can't let the people see me like this. But I've come to a point where I can't face it alone. He's fearful for himself, but he's fearful for the movement. He receives probably one of the most amazing gifts he ever could. He believes he heard Jesus Christ respond to him. The response is very clear. Martin Luther, stand up for what is right. Stand up for justice. Stand up for truth. For lo, I will be with you. I will be with you until the end. He said later on, this was really a turning point for him. He was suddenly at peace. He didn't feel overwhelmed or overtaken by this fear of what might happen to him. 3 days later, his house was bombed, but he survived. This wasn't his first incident with a bomb. The year before, there was a bomb put on his porch, a pipe bomb. This is where we meet the next guy, He'll turn the slide for me. Oh, sorry, that's his house where the bomb is. But this next guy. So, 1955, a pipe bomb's found on his front porch. 4:30 in the morning, this guy, Van Pruitt, gets a phone call. Van Pruitt is 23 years old. So for some of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. 23 years old, fresh out of pharmacy school, new to the force. He's brought in to dismantle the bomb. He doesn't get to the house and go, is this guy black or white? Is this guy part of that ruckus that's going on here in town? He didn't ask those questions. He goes and he does his job, and he does it very well. Very humble man. His wife doesn't even know what's happened until the next day when she sees this newspaper article and sees him. Wait, what? What did you do yesterday? That's him right there in the middle. Not the guy with the hat. The arrow didn't translate well, sorry. He's been over the bomb. They successfully dismembered it. Van Pruitt was invited back to the king's house for coffee. They're so impressed by him. The simple act of courage. This was his job. You know, you guys know enough about police work that you recognize that we call it courage because they're doing something that we don't want to do. This is every day, and yet he did something that was history-changing. What happens if that had not worked? What happens if he'd said, no way, I'm not going to that guy's house? What happened? Instead, he went. I'm super grateful he did. Obviously for the historical context, but for something a little bit more personal to me, Van Pruitt is the father of probably one of my favorite guys in this world. No offense, but you know what I mean, really. One of our mentors, great friend, great man, Bruce Pruitt, son of Van. It's come to our attention that they actually didn't even know about this. Van was just this very humble guy. You ask him, tell us about yourself, person who's going to say that I love God. God and my family are the most important things. He's not going to tell you about this. One of his sons was watching TV one night, was watching a documentary about Dr. King, and he sees his dad pop up on the screen. He's like, well, I know that guy. You know. How cool and frustrating is that? Could have known something cool. Simple act, 23 years old. He changed history. Again, he was just doing his job. But he did it well. The next one I want to talk to you about is a guy by the name of Fred Gray. Fred Gray is the guy over, that's a more recent picture with the Faulkner Law background. Nice plug for my alma mater, by the way. But the black and white photo, Gray is the guy on the far right-hand side. If you notice, the person on the left is Rosa Parks. Fred Gray was the attorney for Rosa Parks, who's 24 years old. 24 years old. He is a remarkable man. Still goes back, he speaks at Faulkner. Still a force to be reckoned with. Still a great voice for the civil rights movement. A wealth of knowledge. He's important because he's the guy fresh out of law school, which, by the way, you couldn't find one in Alabama that would admit him, so he had to go to Cleveland, Ohio to go to law school. Always committed to going back down south to go work for the civil rights of his community. So when he returned, he ended up having to go to work pretty quick. Mrs. Parks wasn't the first one he ended up having to defend, but she's probably the one we most know. 24 years old. Could you imagine it in that case at 24 years old? Likely he had no idea at the time how important it was, right? It's not when you're right there in the moment do you realize this is pretty big. 24. I'm 38. What have I done with my life? I may be happy with where I am. These guys are amazing. These guys are you. So my question is, what are you doing? What history-making things are you doing? you changing the world inadvertently or purposefully? Are you standing up for what's right? Because this guy sure did. His work with Rosa Parks led into some amazing things that we still talk about today. When he went back to Montgomery to open his law practice, he also went back to be a preacher. He preached at his home congregation, Holt Street Church of Christ. Double duty. That's a lot of work. He was a good, godly man, or is a good, godly man, I should say. He ended up representing the Montgomery Improvement Association in their year-long battle with the Montgomery bus boycott. Again, he's so young. But he did something so significant. The civil rights movement wouldn't be where it is without these three guys. Let's read for me, guys. 1 Timothy 4:12, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. You guys hear this verse all the time, I think. Maybe not, but you probably hear it more often than not. But I want to point out to you, example for the believers in speech, in conduct. Are we all doing that? Are we all speaking the way we should? Are we all acting the way we should? Because these guys, I'm not saying they had it all together. 26, 23, 24. That's you guys. Some of you, it's you guys right now. Some of you, it's just a few years. What are you doing? Are you embracing the opportunities in front of you? Are you changing the world? Because these guys did. You see, when Dr. King began that Montgomery bus boycott, that speech I told you about earlier, he had 12 years and 4 months left to live. He'd have been 38 when he died. 38. It's kind of humbling. I don't have to show for myself. 38. I don't know. He did something remarkable. I encourage you to do that. If you didn't know, February is Black History Month. And since 1976, every president has declared February to be Black History Month. It began as a week-long celebration in February and grew into this month. And this month you are going to hear from your classmates each Wednesday. Excuse me. You are going to be encouraged with some moment in time, some information about some Black innovator, inventor, or mover. If you notice in the cafeteria, you're going to see table tents on there with different people, representatives of the Black history movement. I encourage you to read those, and then if you'll walk outside of the cafeteria, there's a bulletin board, more information there. I appreciate your attention, but I want to leave you with the idea that these guys were young and so are you. Don't waste your opportunity. Be inspired. Move. Be a history changer, just like these guys were. Thanks.